Today, I want to talk to you about survival of the fittest. Now, that idea, survival of the fittest, where does it come from? Well, we all know that. I mean, it's quite simple, right? Charles Darwin, the founder of evolution. I mean, the guy who discovered the evolutionary biological evolution. And he said that species evolve over time due to heritable variations that affect survival and reproduction. And this has been termed in the media, in our vernacular, as survival of the fittest. We've all heard about this. Only the strong survive. But yet Charles Darwin did not make that famous. That was Herbert Spencer. Herbert Spencer was a speaker and a guy that traveled around and gave lectures primarily to rich audiences during that time. He was a great orator. He was very charismatic. And, this is before Netflix. So what did you do on a Thursday night? You went and saw Herbert Spencer talk. I mean, he was a great orator. He was exciting and energizing, and it was a great social event. Herbert Spencer's the one that read the book, The Origin of Species. He read Darwin's work, and then he gave his social commentary on it. And he said, look, to his rich people audience, he said, hey, what this really means is survival of the fittest. Only the strong survive. The strong eat the weak. And that was really eaten up by his audience of more affluent folks. Yet that was not what Charles Darwin said. Actually, Herbert Spencer applied these principles of evolution, this only the strong survive, over to the capitalists. And he convinced them that just like evolution, the natural order of things is for money to concentrate at the top with those who are the survivors, those who eat, the poor. So, but what did Charles Darwin actually say about survival of the fittest? Well, he did come up with the phrase, but not what you think. Those communities, which include the greatest number of most sympathetic members, would flourish best and rear the greatest number of offspring. Wait, what? Sympathy is the number one. Sympathy is the number one driver of evolution. Interesting. Actually, it even goes a little bit further than that. It hardly seems probable, this is Darwin's quote, the number of men gifted with virtues such as bravery and sympathy could be increased through natural selection. That is, by the survival of the fittest. That's right. Charles Darwin didn't believe in survival of the fittest. He believed that sympathy and bravery and all of these things came from cooperation. It is Herbert Spencer that took that idea and made it into what it is today. Now, Darwin eventually went and saw Herbert Spencer as word got back to him that this was happening, and Herbert Spencer was out giving this talk, and it was being widely accepted. And this is the ChatGPT. I found all the summaries from the press and his work. So Charles Darwin fed him into ChatGPT and said, what does this mean in modern terms? And Spencer argues so confidently, one can forget he doesn't have a clue what he's talking about. It's completely and totally fabricated. But yet, 160 years later, we still believe that. We've built our businesses on it. We've built our society on it, on a misunderstanding of a basic principle of evolution. The reality is the thing that stands apart more than anything else with evolution is cooperation, collaboration, working together, helping each other. Those are the things that give us competitive advantage. I want to pause there for a second, because cooperating is probably not what you think about with competitive advantage, but that's the truth. It is cooperation. It is sympathy. It is empathy. It is working to stabilize and organize a market together. Now, there's two different types of evolution, so I want to be clear on that. I don't want to just throw this out there. There are two different types of evolution, and I think they prove our point. There is phyletic gradualization, and that means that over time, that genetic the genetic composition, there's a bit of variation in it, and that variation is found to be better for the environment. And that genetic profile continues on, and it keeps being evolved over and over and over. I grow a lot of fruit in my house, and we have a lot of citrus. And you can buy some of these like original citrus trees, and they're weird looking. Like they look like the one on the left. That's what citrus usually look like. And it's a little tiny bit of fruit inside, and most of it is just the pith. So it evolved genetically this way. This is the continuous growth or development of a species. Things over time, slowly, gradually moving over hundreds and millions of years. That's phyletic gradualization. The other one is called punctuated equilibrium. This is the other type of evolution there is. The one that we know of, that phyletic gradualization, is pretty common. But punctuated equilibrium makes way more sense when we understand what it is. And you'll understand it here in a minute. It is the suddenly. Little Billy Ocean call out there. It's when things happen suddenly that force a species to do things that are not the normal things that it did. It might have to eat different things. It might have to migrate. It might have to just respond differently to the environment. This could be a comet. It could be a volcano. These things have happened in Earth's history. Could be a tweet. I mean, in this day and age, we're just one tweet away from who knows what, a change in the tariffs, a new war, some release of documents. There's always something going on in the news that could create punctuated equilibrium. Tariffs, AI, judicial rulings, drones, war, nukes in Iran. All of these things can dramatically change the environment. And here's the most interesting thing about punctuated equilibrium. When you live in an environment where there's a lot of change, I think we live in an environment where there's a lot of change. When you live in that environment where there's I'm going to blow my face up here. Come on, let's do this. Let's do it a little bigger. Here we go. Boom, there we go. When you live in an environment with punctuated equilibrium, guess who doesn't do real well in that environment? Yeah, the fittest. Isn't that interesting? Think about that for a minute. When there is a change in the environment, who goes extinct? The fittest. The fittest go extinct because they have a routine. They only eat certain types of food. They require a certain amount of calories. They require to be in a certain environment with a certain types of things. When those things start to deteriorate and there's change on the horizon, they just go extinct. And look back at the stock market of 20, 30, 40 years ago. These things happen all the time, right? Those who grow the fastest tend to get hurt the worst when there's change. That's survival of the fittest. Now, ExxonMobil is a really great example of this. We know the tiger has been endangered for a long time, but do you remember this as a kid? That ExxonMobil's logo was a tiger. Put a tiger in your tank. That's ESSO. That's the UK, EU. Around the world, they're known as ESSO. Here in the US, we call them ExxonMobil. But that was their motto. That was their slogan for a long time. And eventually somebody realized something. It does not look good for a brand to have their corporate mascot go extinct. So what did they do? Well, ExxonMobil recognized the changing conditions and they began to invest heavily into saving the tigers. And a lot of people still to this day say that ExxonMobil is responsible for saving the wild tigers because somebody at ExxonMobil looked around and said, this is not going to be a good idea if these things go extinct. And it's a sign of our brand. We've got to participate in the saving of the tigers. So this idea that survival of the fittest gives you some sort of evolutionary or competitive advantage, it's just totally and completely false. It doesn't prove out naturally. It doesn't prove out in the market. So why do we still believe it? The reality is 70%. This statistic is regularly used. You can find it quoted all over the place without any real reference. 70% of US businesses fail. Well, that's actually false. It's only 48% of US businesses fail in a 5-year period. If they franchise, if they've systematized, if they've really thought about their process and understood how the changing conditions might affect them, when that occurs, they're only a 15% chance of failure. Where do we get this 70% number? Would you ever wonder? Well, here it is. 67% of companies fail if they make the Inc. 5000 list. That was in Fortune magazine in 2016. They looked at the Inc. 5000, the fastest growing companies list, that list that we're all trying to get on. They looked at that. And they realized that is the number one indicator if you're going to go out of business. Because you focus, again, going back, you're the lion, you're the polar bear, you're the tiger. You're trying to survive in a market that is changing. And that is not the way to survive in a market that's changing. To survive in a market that's changing, you need cooperation and collaboration and empathy and sympathy. Look at some of my other videos. You need the why theory of management. Actually, what you need is the system. You need a system that helps you navigate through that. 5-year failure rate, 70%. Think about that. 67% of the time when you try to grow, you actually doom yourself. So we don't want to do that. We want to make sure that we've created an environment and a system that works both during times of growth and little change, and also during times of change. We don't want to go extinct.